Welcome to the MrpTech Podcast. This is episode 25, and my name is Matt. And this is a weekly podcast where I review multiple platforms and technologies to see which works best for me in order to help you. And in today's episode, I'd like to discuss my thoughts and feelings behind something that happened last week in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Many of you probably heard on the news that a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket was lost during a test. And I want to get into that in this episode and just discuss some of my thoughts behind that, because I have brought up SpaceX in the past on a few other episodes here. Before I get into that, I want to make a disclaimer that this podcast has the potential to be listened to by those who have far more technical knowledge than I do on this subject. I am an enthusiast. I'm always learning and trying to improve. But from time to time, I may misspeak on a couple of things, and I may make an error here or there, but I will try my best to keep things as accurate as I can. This podcast is intended for those who may not know about SpaceX or know what SpaceX is. This could be for my students or for friends of mine or for other listeners who just have a general interest in the topic. And I want to take a step back, and I want to talk about how I got into learning about SpaceX. About a year ago, I read the Elon Musk biography. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know much about him. And after I finished the book, I thought it was a good read. But even then, it was something that I really wasn't all that interested in. I was more interested in the story behind Elon. I was interested in the fact that when he was 12 years old, he was writing his own software to create games. I'm interested in the fact that some of the ideas that he open sources, such as the idea behind the Hyperloop technology. And as time went on, I started finding that more and more that I read from this book was being broadcast in the news, and SpaceX and Tesla were really making lots of progress in many different ways. So as I started learning more about SpaceX and hearing SpaceX in the news, I started to follow some of the launches and webcasts on YouTube. And with these webcasts, I learned all about the reusable rocket technology. And that really sparked an interest in me for some reason. I had grown up watching space shuttle launches occasionally, and I always would have seen a lot of the waste that you see from these rocket launches. And the idea of a reusable rocket really started to pique my interest just on so many different levels. And so as these webcasts were being broadcast, and they would talk about these experimental landings of the first stage of the rocket, I would see how each time that these experimental landings failed, there would be a massive explosion. But if you really watched, it would be closer and closer and closer to a success until finally they did succeed and were able to land multiple rockets on ships out in the ocean and even on land. So I use these attempts. If you don't know who I am, I'm a technology enthusiast. I'm also a teacher. I am a band instructor, and so music is another part of my life. And so I try to use things like this to inspire students, especially for students who play an instrument, and they may have some issues. Playing an instrument is hard for some students, and they want to give up very easily. So what I started doing, for a fun topic, something different, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show them some of the things that were going on right now that were much more difficult than playing an instrument. And I tried to express to them that in order to be good at something, you have to make mistakes and learn from them in order to get better. And so what I'd do is I would show these SpaceX videos of these first stage rockets trying to land on a platform and remind my students that playing an instrument isn't rocket science. You know, there are hard things about playing an instrument, but there are much more complicated things in the world. And as time went on, I would show these students all of the failures that were being made, all of the experimental landings that had failed, until one day there was a success. And the students could see that in life, if you make mistakes, you can learn from those mistakes and succeed and become successful. And that sometimes these companies can make mistakes or learn from a technology that they are developing. And each time they keep trying, they better themselves. They're trying to learn and learn from these failures until they succeed. So after these launches, I was watching these first stage launches. I then became more and more interested in SpaceX. And I started finding ways to learn more about these rockets and the technologies. And one of the things I came across was a Facebook group. It's a public group on Facebook that is for SpaceX enthusiasts. With that, I think I've learned more in a short period of time than I would have reading in many different areas. By following this page, I found other enthusiasts who were much closer to the action, so to speak, than I was. I'm about as far away from any area that will launch rockets into space than probably most people are. So I am, if I were to go watch a rocket launch, I would have to travel about 1,000 miles to get to the nearest place where rockets are launched. So by following this page, I can learn about all the technologies behind this, which is really interesting to me. So as I followed this page, I started finding more and more information on how rockets are built, what the process is for a launch, how much launches normally cost, and how much SpaceX is charging for launches. And as time went on, I started to discover the philosophy behind Elon Musk and what he is trying to do to better the future for all of us, where rocket launches can sometimes cost upwards of $300 million. With this reusable technology, we're reducing the cost by 30 or 40% and making reusable rockets to be used in the future. So again, as time went on, I would follow more and more launches, and I'd get excited about these launches and experimental landings, and they started to become routine for a lot of people. But for me, it was still new and exciting because this is something that I just have recently gotten into over the last year. So as the beginning of September started rolling around, I was following some websites that give information on dates and times for rocket launches, and I knew that there was a launch coming up on September 3rd. And so I started following these pages on Facebook and other articles and news online just in anticipation for the next launch. Well, I was sitting at work one day and came across a news headline that was sort of shocking, and that there was an explosion at Cape Canaveral in Florida. I immediately went onto the Facebook page of SpaceX, and the first thing that I had saw there was someone had reported a loud noise coming from Cape Canaveral area, and they sort of were joking that was it the Falcon 9, and other people had mentioned that the hurricane was going through the area, and it may have been thunder from hurricanes, and so there was sort of confusion until shortly after somebody else had made a post that you're probably going to regret what you said about it being the Falcon 9. And then just a few minutes later, the news broke that there was an anomaly and the Falcon 9 had exploded just before a test. So my first reaction was, oh my God, I hope everybody was okay. I hope everyone is safe, because this is something that I had never seen before. I've seen other rockets fail after a launch or shortly after a launch, but this wasn't even near a launch time. It was a couple of days before. So I sort of started feeling really terrible because I knew that this was going to be a major setback of some kind. I knew that just from hearing and seeing other rockets explode, that obviously that when that happens, it's never good. But I was surprised as time went on, looking at this group on Facebook, that all of the comments were very supportive, and there are a lot of intelligent people that are on this page that understand how difficult space travel really is. And the comment that I kept reading over and over is that space is hard. It's something that is extremely difficult to achieve, and there are always chances for problems and setbacks. As the news broke, I sort of also realized that as excited as I get for these launches, the chances of all of the other launches coming up within the next month or 2 months, there was a number of them. The chances of them actually happening now also decreased. So I also felt bad that I wasn't going to get to see all of these wonderful webcasts that I have been accustomed to over the last 6 months. So what happened? So I'm going to try to get in and just give a brief explanation of what happened without speculating what caused any of these problems, just in case anybody is curious. So what I've come across is shortly before a SpaceX rocket launch, there is a static test that happens, a static test fire. And this is a way to double check the vehicle for any problems or issues before the actual launch. In many cases, there are so many sensors and video that can give clues to problems before the launch itself. So about 8 minutes before this test was going to happen, the rocket itself was in the process of being fueled. And by watching a video of the U.S. launch reports, posted a video on YouTube. This is a group of veterans who have pooled their resources together to follow rocket launches. And by watching this video, about 8 minutes before this test fire were to occur, there was a massive explosion. And Elon Musk actually called it a fast fire, not an explosion. To me, I understand the concept of what he was trying to say. It did result in explosions afterwards, and also resulted in the total loss of the rocket and the satellite payload. The satellite was owned by an Israeli security company, and part of it was being leased by Facebook in order to provide internet access to parts of Africa. Watching the video, the explosion started near the top, so that would sort of explain that the problem occurred in the second stage of the rocket, near where the liquid oxygen tanks would be. But there really is no word yet on what officially caused the anomaly. There are all sorts of speculations out there on what caused it, what problems it could it be external, could have been a problem with the pad, could it be a problem with the rocket second stage itself, could there have been a problem with the fueling mechanism, could it have been a problem with the payload, the satellite on board? At this point, we don't know yet what caused that, and we may not know for a very long time. But really what made me sick after hearing about this explosion is the media has a field day with this type of event. And why doesn't the media show when the good things happen? Time after time, there are successful launches by SpaceX and other companies that very rarely gets any coverage on the news. And it's only when something bad happens or when something negative happens that there is any coverage. And when that happens, when you're dealing with these failures, instead of the positive things that happen, all sorts of false information is spread. One of the things, I went to my local news website, and the comments from these articles really led me to believe how misinformed a lot of people are. Many people were concerned about the waste of taxpayer money. And in reality, this is a private company, and taxpayers aren't paying a single cent for these rockets to be launched. This is a private company with their own schedules and agendas for launching these satellites, and they're footing the bill for it. So all this false information out there really led me back to all of the positive things that were coming, all the positive thoughts and encouragement that I was seeing, that just like at the very beginning of this podcast, when I said that in order to get good at something, you need to fail first and learn from those failures in order to succeed. And that is something that I've been telling my students for years, and it really relates in this case too. A lot of people are saying, when NASA was first testing rockets, or when commercial flights were first starting to happen, the failure rate was much higher. And as time went on, problems were solved, mistakes were corrected and success became more common. And that's exactly what's happening with SpaceX right now. As they learn more about the technologies and they learn from every single launch, whether they're successful or not, mistakes can be found and corrected, and failures are going to happen with something as volatile as rocket launches. We're dealing with extremely flammable chemicals. I've learned all about hydrazine and liquid oxygen and the good and bad of using all of these fuels or propellant. And what I've really learned from this SpaceX community is that there is a vision for the future in which things are very positive. There are great people out there doing great things. If you look at SpaceX and Tesla and companies similar to those, we're really living in a time where we're just on the cusp of breaking through a lot of barriers that we've had for the last 40 years in these types of technologies. What's really interesting that I didn't see on the news, but found out again from this community, is that at the same time when all of this is happening with SpaceX, they're building a Hyperloop test track near their main campus in California. And Elon Musk has said from time to time that he does not want to get involved with Hyperloop, even though it was his idea. He wants someone else to come up with concepts to do this. Here we are in the middle of a failure, and there's no coverage being made that a Hyperloop test track is being made, and that there was a contest for test vehicles for this Hyperloop. And also at the same time, there is so much criticism out there. There was little talk of the other rocket failure that happened. There was a Chinese rocket that launched on the same day that also failed. But it seems to me that whenever people are trying to do great things, they will be criticized to a much greater extent. And I think that comes with the job. I think that comes with all of the ideas that Elon has. But as more and more successes are made, again, these enthusiasts help, and more people get on board every day. And we're all just trying to learn and improve from everything that we do. We really have to say that failure paves the way for success. And I really hope that this failure will cause SpaceX to find whatever caused this and move on from it and lead to a higher success rate. Because when you think about it, the sky is full of satellites. There is a constant need for things like a commercial space program and a private space program. And we're now moving on to asteroid mining. And really, this is just a setback, a temporary setback. And I really believe that the media blew this out of proportion. At this point, the key is how much damage had occurred during this, what really caused the problem, and what can pave the way to resume sending these satellites or other payloads to space. The answer is right now nobody knows anything, and it's going to take time. The Air Force is involved because this was at the Air Force Station on Cape Canaveral. But what I like is that the fact that a company like SpaceX makes public announcements. They inform us all when something like this happens, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. They are open as much as they can be to the public, and very informative. The SpaceX website has an update section where they're talking about the anomaly that happened, trying to identify the root cause of it. They're trying to discuss the launch pad itself. They're not sure how much damage has been incurred. But the great thing is that even with this damaged pad, they have several other launch pads available. One is being completed within the next few months. They have another one in Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. And they're also building another one in Boca Chica, Texas, that won't be ready for a few years. But there are other options and places available for them. So when you're really looking at the scope of this, it really is a minor setback. who knows how long it will be before the next launch. Obviously, there is a safety concern, and I'm so glad that nobody was hurt in this incident. That was ultimately the very first thing that came to my mind, and I just don't want any injuries on top of the millions of dollars that are lost when something like this happens. And most satellite launches, or most launches in general, have insurance to cover these costs of these accidents that are prone to happen occasionally. So this particular payload did have insurance, and because it happened so soon, we're not really sure exactly what the ramifications will be because of that. There's a lot of speculation. There will probably be several lawsuits or litigation along the way to sort of rectify the situation and what happened. All that's to be expected. But I don't believe that this is the end for SpaceX. They are already looking towards the future. They understand that they are going to learn from their mistakes. And that's all we can really hope for, is that the successes will come sooner rather than later. And so that's my thoughts on everything that's happened with SpaceX, how I learned about it, what I've read. I have learned so much from just following this one group on Facebook, and I had to just talk about it for a few minutes because as a teacher, we're always trying to satisfy our needs as being a lifelong student. And I have so many interests. I'm interested in technology and computers and software, but I'm also interested in other technologies like rocket technology. And as a teacher, we try to find ways to relate to our students. And the more that we can learn about any topic really benefits our students in the long run. So I'm going to end the topic there. I'm going to not speculate on what caused the anomaly or anything like that, but I'd like some feedback. I'd like you to leave me a review. You can subscribe to my RSS feed for this audio podcast. It's in the show notes below. You can also check out my Facebook page. It's MrpTech Reviews. Just search for that. You can send me an email, mrptechreviews@gmail.com. And I've also got a website, www.mrptechreviews.wix.com/home. And feel free to check out other videos and podcasts that I've done in the past. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I tried to be as informative and as accurate, at the same time being as simple and relatable as I could for this episode. And leave me some feedback. How's the audio quality on your device? How does the sound come across to you? If you're a podcast listener, if you're a first-time listener, if you're a second-time listener, or if you've been listening the whole time, leave me some feedback. Give me ideas for future shows. And thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.